lessons that I've learned over the last 40 years on oil. So I made this little diagram up. We'll pretend that this brown area on the outside is your brass clock plate. And these are your oil wells that come in here. These are your pivots, shaft, and then the gear would be down below that. And this gives you an idea of what we're looking for when we put oil into the oil wells and the pivots. So these are supposed to be blue in here. This shows up better on the bottom one, I think. But when you don't have enough oil, this one is too little oil, the oil, you touched it and it touched the shaft and it sucked down a little bit on the shaft, but there's nothing to feed the oil well with. So this isn't a good scenario. The better thing to do is to go back with another little touch of oil and feed it so that it looks something about like this. So the oil is just below the pivot line, and enough in the oil well and enough that has drawn down through that it stays right there in the pivot area and the well. Now you don't want too much, because what happens when you see there's too much oil, then the oil comes on down through, but you notice where it is now, it's clear out on the outside of the shaft, and then eventually what it does is it draws down the shaft, and this oil well ends up empty, just like this one. And then you start wearing the bushing area in here and the pivot. So that's kind of what you're looking for. So when you oiled your clock, especially if you're a beginner, I think the idea is make sure you see plenty of oil in there, and that's not what you want. You just barely want to see a little bit of oil right in this little area right here. Right in there. If you see a lot more, then take your Q-tip, and that's what I use. And it does happen, you're going to over oil. But you try not to, but if you do, you can suck that oil back out of here. Problem is if it's gone on down past this shaft. So take your Q-tip and go in between your plates with a little alcohol and see if you can wipe this shaft clean. Suck out all that oil, and then come back up here and do it again. The idea is, ideally, is just to have just barely enough oil in here, and just enough that it goes down and stays sticky on the shaft. So, and that's what we call the viscosity of the oil. And you'll have a lifelong running clock, so it pays to do it right the first time, and it takes a little more time. You don't just rush through it. And you'll find that if you do it this way, make sure that you're in the center here, the center one, correctly oiled, you'll find your clock will probably run a lot better. I've gone out and checked several, when we serviced a grandfather clock, and for whatever reason we had to go back out and check it. I used to find that the oil was gone out of the housing here, and I wasn't quite figuring out what was going on. So of course you slab some more oil in there, and pretty soon you got a big mess, and all it does is it just goes down through the bottom and soaks right on out. And after about a year or so, your clock is running dry. And after about 5 years, you can be getting to go out and replace the whole unit or rebush the whole unit, depending on which way is more economical. So this is a really good learning lesson here. Don't overfill your oil wells. Make sure that they're just below the pivot line if you can. Now, some clocks don't have much of an oil sink, and when those don't, then all you want to do is just make sure you barely see the oil go down into the shaft. And that would be with one that does not have much of an oil sink. And there are quite a few of them that don't. The cheaper clocks tend not to have a very good oil well. But the richer clocks, the Keinigers and the Hermels and all those, seem to have a good well for the oil system. Now we need to understand a little bit more about oils, and I do not pretend to say that my oil or any oil is the best oil. I've heard all of this, and there are so many different oils out there, but most of the oils that I've seen are that light yellow, and they're the fully synthetic oils, but I don't like them very well. Of course, Estenia, Mobil, Keystone, Nye, Liberty. Oh, there's a slug full. Mobilus, sperm tooth well oil. I don't think they make that anymore. I think they've pretty well disbanded that. I think early 80s or maybe the late 70s you could still find it, but it was kind of it was made from sperm tooth wells, and they boiled and rendered the oils out of them, then refined them, and by doing hydrogenation on them, and what that did is that kept the smell from going in there. So that was one of the types. There are plants and lipids and animal fats. There are just all kinds of oil, mineral oils. A lot of times they're a derivative of mineral oils and plant oils to make a synthetic oil or a refractor oil. And you want to kind of think this thing out a little bit and make up your own decisions. Once again, I'm not telling you which oils to use. I've used a couple, over the 40 years, probably 3 or 4 of the different high-grade oils, and I'm beginning to find out that what I thought was the ideal oils really weren't the best oils to be using. So with that, we'll go on here. Oh, we got a clock. Alrighty. So oils, all these oils have one thing in common, and that's viscosity. And the viscosity at 70 degrees is how they determine its runoff. So let's go into that, a little bit of that. Now this is about, and I'm not here to tell you anything. I'm telling you what I've learned and what I believe, and you go from there. So all of the the old timers who swear by their oils, they're not going to change anyway. And the newbies, I'm trying to give them an idea what they might want to look for in an oil. Now this bottle here is a high-end bottle. I've had it for 2 or 3 years, and I think that bottle was $99, a $100 bill, and I had 2 of them I got 2 of these bottles because we go through a lot of oil over a period of a year. Not quite this much maybe, but we did. Now this is $32 for a little liter of milliliter of oil. This is Mobilus oil, and this is another grade of Mobilus oil. One's made for ultrasonic cleaning watches. The other one is also a watch type oil. There is 3-in-1, and I do use 3-in-1, but before you get too excited about it, the only thing I use 3-in-1 for is after I've cleaned the mainspring, taken the mainspring out of the barrel if it has a barrel, and I wash it in the sonic bath. When I get done, I take a paper towel and I spill a little of this oil on the paper towel, and then I pull it all the way around the clock spring and pull it all the way through it. So if you got like a 4-foot spring, you'd pull all the way through the 4 feet. And you can also do that after you've cleaned a clock where the springs are loose in the clock itself. You can grab a hold of the bottom of the inside arbor area of the mainspring, and then take your oil here, and then after it's been cleaned, and pull it again, and you'll see a lot of sludge that comes off that mainspring. Now you can oil it properly. This is I don't consider this really an oil. It is, but I don't use it for oiling anything. It's just a cleaner is what I use it for. I've seen people spray their clocks with DW40, other sprays, and over a small period of time, and the sludge builds up. It eats out the lacquer on the plates. Most clocks have a lacquer plating on them, and then it reacts with the brass and turns it green, and that's a no-no. Don't use spray oils. They're not any good for your clock. This one here was one of the high-end clock oils. It's not Astenia, but it is a high-end and trade name oil. And the reason I don't want to say anything is because I don't want you making up your mind on just one thing. Take a look at the whole thing that we're talking about, and then you make a decision. So this is the Red Dragon oil. It's a heavier oil, and but it's a fully 100% synthetic oil. It's made in small batches. I've seen it in 2 or 3 different places, and I'll put a link in the video where you can buy it, or you can go to eBay. I think they carry it too. So this is not real expensive, but it's not real cheap either. But I'll explain the viscosity between this and this one. This is the high-end clock oil, and we'll see whether you want to make a decision with that. Now, these are little clock tools, and these are for watches, and they're this tiny little thing. They will work, but I don't like them because you can't get a hold of them. They're just, you know, in the watch business, it's not too bad because you're dipping right there in front of your watch, and you're oiling the spots that you're supposed to. But I don't like these very well, so I don't buy those. They make tools. This is a watch or a clock tool. This is designed to just use for the greases, and it's a neat little tool. And you can buy these too. I think I've seen them. I think the same company, Red Dragon, sells these, and you can get them too. So let's go on now. The viscosities. Well, there's a couple, 3 different names for it, and what we're looking for is the runoff. So let's take water, for instance, and honey, and let's take an ounce of both. And you take the glass and you pour it into a bowl, and you see how fast the runoff is. You time it. So if it's a half a second, that would be the determining factor, and you divide it out by mathematics, and that would be its viscosity. And then you take the honey and you do the same thing. You pour it into a bowl and you wait for the same amount, and how long it takes for it to go into the bowl. Mathematically, you can figure this out, and that'll give you the viscosity. It's basically how thick the oil is, or how thick the whatever fluid you're using. And most of the clock oils, here's where I fail to believe that these high-end clock oils are the best. Look at this. It's just like water. And this, like I said, this is a $100 bottle of oil. And the viscosity on this is about between 20 and 40. And that is where I find the problem, because it doesn't have the stay power to stay right where you put it. It wants to flow out of the bearing housing, the well, and it tends to suck down over the shaft and right on out onto the gear, and away it goes. So you think you got yourself oiled, and about 6 months or a year later you come back and take a look and you don't see any oil. So I stopped using this about 2.5 years ago, and I still have plenty. You know, I don't use it much anymore. I stumbled into this, and I like it. And look at the difference between well, this is a smaller bottle, but look at the difference between these. This is just a nice viscosity of right around 220 to 240, and it stays put, and it lubricates that shaft, and it leaves that lubrication on that shaft to protect it, and it works far better. So now they make a kit, and I bought this in here to show you. This is their kit, and let's open it up. I bought 2 of these. Where the hell do they think that was going to go? Anyway, I bought 2 of these. One for my clock kit when I'm on the road, if I'm out servicing the clock, and I think I can get away with oiling it instead of having to tear it down and bring it in. And these come packaged like this. And here's, I'll put this over here and get this out of the way. Alright, let's get this out of the way for a minute. This is what you get. Oh, that's all I need to do. You get I think these are ½ ounce, so that's going to last a long time when you're on the road. You get a little oil dipper, so you can pour your oil on here and use it to dip. You get it. This is your lube, gear lube, to grease certain areas of your clocks, and there's enough in here to last you a hookah amount. And then they got get a little envelope like that, and here you get 2 oilers. And these you get your hand on, and I like that. It's about the same as a watch oiler, but it really is nice because you can just get wherever you want, and if you got to go down the inside, you can go right down there and touch wherever you need. So these are excellent. And there's your tip, and you just dip it in your oil and go touch away. And then they give you this one here, and I couldn't figure out what this one was for a while. Then it dawned on me, oh, that's for greasing your hammers, your star gear, and any cam that you deem that you need to oil. And it works absolutely beautiful because it allows you to put that grease right where you want it instead of it getting all over your clock and your gears. And about 2 years ago, so forth. And that's now we're getting a little long in this synthetic oil altogether. Okay, but and so let's go ahead and put a healthy dose on here. Now watch what happens the minute I touch it. Look at how the oil starts to see the size of the circle now. So let's clean this off because we want to. This isn't a a 100% test, but because there's no way to control the amount. I'm going to put that oil right here. Now, if you start to look already, this is why I don't use this clock oil anymore. Look at how wide that's gotten over a small, just a couple of 30 seconds, 40 seconds, and it's still migrating outward. And this oil stays tight, and that's where the key is. You want your oils to stay tight and pocket inside your well sockets so that it stays there and doesn't run all over the place. These oils, I'm telling you, in my opinion, they're just, the viscosity is not thick enough. And almost every one of the clock oils, they got the sewing machine oils. Liberty is another one that is a nice, what they think is a good oil, but all of them, and I shouldn't have said that name, but they all come up with this same formula, and it's just like water. And look at the size of that area there, and it just doesn't do what I like it to do. So that's I don't know that you can see exactly, but you can get an idea. This is almost papered out all the way to paper thin, and it's just rolled clear out. This one stayed put. Now it migrated a little bit, I think, but it just stays where you put it, and so you know your bearing and your pivot is going to get adequate oil, and it's going to stay there for a very long period of time, thus letting that clock run a whole lot better. So it's a nice little quickie test. Nobody's doing anything. It's about the same amount of oils, and you can almost see this one's just getting ready. It's starting to run now. Look at it run. You take this one, and it's clumping. See it's having a hard time moving. So, well, that's the best I can do for a little quickie test, so that you can see what's going on. And now, we didn't use this oil for any clocks, so it's not contaminated, and I'm going to pour it back, because this is really expensive, and you never know, might need it for something. I don't know exactly what, but it's kind of funny. I'm a funny person, you know. Everything, you know. This has been a long time trying to get this made, because I dropped my camera, and that hurt. That hurt me worse than it did. I was bringing it in from the office, and I stumbled, and it fell out of my hand, hit the floor, and the autofocus didn't want to work anymore. So, okay. Finally, it started working on its own, so there might be some hope for me yet, you know. Okay, let's see if I can show you this one. This is just a syringe. I used this for years too, and I noticed on the high-end clock oils that it eats the rubber out of here, and I noticed that on this oil here it doesn't. It leaves it pretty much intact, and you can pull the plunger in and out. But I don't use these anymore, because there's no real control of how you can get your oil into the wells. You tend to over oil with these. So I stopped using these a number of years ago. And you can see that the oil is still in this one, but you can't hardly turn the plunger anymore, because the rubber in there kind of ate it up. So don't believe everything you say when they say it won't eat plastic. They kind of eat that. They like rubber. So that was just I thought I'd give you a hindsight there. All right. Now, what did I do with the cap? Okay, here we are. So we already got our oil poured. And let me get a visor, because my eyesight's damn poor. I can't see anymore. And we'll commence oiling the clock my way. And here again, maybe somebody will disagree with that, if they have a better way of